Hello everyone, what's up? In tonight's video I'm going to review Anvil Industries' Gothic Void Troopers line of 3D printed models. Before we start, let me clarify that Anvil Industry was kind enough to send me the STL file for these miniatures as a review sample. However, this is not a paid promotion and Anvil has absolutely no say in the content of this review. As for the physical models that you see in front of you, they were printed by my friend Mycroft. I just put them together and then primed them. As you can see from the images, I'm not exactly what you would call a master at building minis. But rest assured that I did clean up the green stuff bits that you can see in the pictures before I primed them. But let us have a look at the models, shall we? This is one of two Ogryns I printed, with a bare head and only one close combat weapon. As you can see, this sculpt is really beautiful, with an amazing level of detail, and an aesthetic that puts me in mind of BioShock. The STL file comes with bases, by the way, and this is probably my favorite of all of them. A really nice touch in my opinion. Things like the cabling, tubing, and oxygen tanks on the back, together with the weapon itself, are probably my favorite elements. By the way, the Mini has large round pegs for easy assembly and would also be very easy to magnetize. The second Ogryn, with that sort of steampunk diving helmet, and the two close combat weapons, is even more imposing. The only problem here is that there is only one Ogryn sculpt in the file, so doing something like a unit of 6, which I would really have liked, is kind of a bit problematic. Now for what is actually my favorite miniature in the whole set in terms of design. An engineer type with an astronaut helmet, a motion detector on one hand, and a detonator or some other kind of remote on the other. Of course, there are many other options in terms of equipment, but I really like the narrative for this, so that's how I put him together. This is a second sort of engineer, perhaps more devoted to aggressive exploration, shall we say. The weapon or tool that he's carrying has two different business ends to choose from, the other one being clearly inspired by the Dead Space video game. The helmet is similar to the other one, but it has a different design, and the backpacks, which are incredibly detailed, also have subtle differences between each other. Next we have what could be a commander with a very nice, flowing cloak. I chose to model him with two pistols, giving him that sort of pirate look. If you look closely, you'll see that one of them has a sort of axe head bayonet, while the other looks almost identical to the one from Dead Space. The last guy I built is a sort of squad leader, with a baroque looking pistol and what looks like a pretty cool power axe. As you can see, the model is quite distinct from the other two. Let's now have a look at some of the other bits and bobs that Mycroft printed for me. I'm sure you will agree that the bases are really cool. Here we can see another Ogryn arm and the peg system that I mentioned before. Adding magnets there should be really easy, but in this case I went for pinning. Here are some shields. The set comes both with boarding shields and with smaller combat shields. Some more torsos. Here you can see another Dead Space style pistol and a regular arm with a ranged weapon, which looks rather archaic, kind of like a flintlock weapon. The smaller pistol has a similar aesthetic. So what could a Horus Heresy gamer use Anvil Industries' Gothic Void Troopers for? Personally, I'm interested in these miniatures as alternative Solar Auxilia models. They would also be fitting for Imperialis Militia, or Militia if you prefer. Now, I'm afraid I don't have any Solar Auxilia infantry to compare this with, but I can show you some other size comparisons at least. First, let's have a look at the engineer side by side with one of my Mark II World Eaters, which are among the smallest 30k Marine sculpts. As you can see, the Gothic Void Trooper is dwarfed by the Startis, as well it should, but it definitely does not look out of scale with it, and I think it's also really well proportionate. With other regular infantry models, the effect is pretty much the same. Now, are these as big as the Forge World Solar Auxilia models, or the Imperial Guard plastics? I don't know for sure, but I suspect they're quite a bit smaller. For me personally, that's not really an issue, but it could be for some people. In any case, if you really want them to be bigger, just change the scale when printing them. A clear advantage there of 3D printing, has to be said. But let's have a look at the big guys. Now the World Eater is looking rather small in turn. Again, I suspect that the Forge World Solar Auxilia Ogryns are probably much bigger yet, but really I don't see that as an impediment necessarily. Here you can see the Ogryn next to a Thalax, a unit with a similar stat line. The Thalax is in a crouching position, but we can see that the two models really seem to be in the same category. And last but not least, let's see how the Ogryn fares compared to Mark IV Boxnaut. The Ogre clearly looks like it could go toe-to-toe with the Dread in a punching match, so I think that makes it clear that it is not too small. Before I tell you what my conclusions are, let's have a look at Anvil Industries' website and Patreon page. In the last few years I have purchased quite a few resin bits from Anvil and I've always been super happy with the quality, but to be honest the designs tended to be a little bit simplistic. Anvil's 3D designs, on the other hand, are another story entirely. Let's have a quick look. As you can see, the file for a whole set like that costs 40 euros, like this trencher set. The design in this particular case is a lot more derivative, shall I say, than that of the Gothic Void Troopers, which are truly original, but it has to be said, these models are really gorgeous. Here is another example, which may be interesting for 30k militia players. This one is a lot more unique, and equally beautiful, I would say. You will have noticed, however, that the Gothic Void Troopers aren't here. That's because they are a Patreon-only release. So as you can see, Anvil has two tiers to their Patreon, the second of which unlocks a monthly release, and the Gothic Troopers were one of these. So all in all, what do I think about these new 3D printed models by Anvil? Well, the miniatures have an amazing level of detail, first of all. The design is both unique and really beautiful, and I really like the fact that they come with some really cool bases. On the other hand, some things that I would ask Anvil to change in future are the way that ranged weapons are designed, I found them really fiddly to be honest, and the fact that there is only one Ogre sculpt, which to my mind makes it a bit useless for people like me who would like to have a big unit of them, no matter how much I love the sculpt. So, provided Anvil addressed those two things, which I think should be easy enough given the medium, I would wholeheartedly recommend these models to anyone looking to have an alternative, unique looking army for either Solar Auxilia or Militia in 30k. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this little review. In coming weeks and months, I'll be reviewing other 3D printed models which I consider heresy appropriate, so to speak. In the meantime, if you want to know more about the history of Forge World, click on the video on the left, and if you want to see my interview with Matt Murphy-Kane of Forge World fame, check out the one on the right. Thank you all, and remember, keep it up and weather it out.